Oh, good morning, everyone. Jamie here, Jamie Brewster's Musical Heroes, and I'm completely honoured and blown away to have one of my musical heroes with us today, Louis Philippe from Shepherd's Bush in West London, posh London, you know. It's not so posh here. So, Louis, welcome very much to the show today. Thanks so
Well,
much for finding
well,
the time.
well, thank you for your kind words, and thank you for your beautiful display behind you. It's quite a spectacular one, I must say.
Well, we sort of cut things out and stick them on cardboard, you know. But maybe Louis, I mean, obviously there's a lot of your fans know exactly who you are, but maybe you could do a little bit of a resume, short resume about who you are exactly, a short bit about your musical past, maybe, and also a little bit on your sports side, because I know you're a football commentator and journalist and also like cricket and understand cricket, which is great, which is
hmm
fantastic. So maybe just a couple of seconds, if you could just sort of, you know, if you
Um,
maybe.
yeah, it's a tricky one because I've been doing this for quite a long time. I mean, I've basically lived a double life for all my adult life, basically. On one hand, I'm a professional musician, and on the other hand, I'm a professional investigative journalist specializing in football. That's what I do.
Okay.
And so I've basically chosen two of the careers in which you're guaranteed never to become a millionaire, and but two vocations which are not necessarily that easy to combine in terms of time, which is why it's taken us so long to finally get some time together.
Okay.
But there you go. I mean, as far as the musician is concerned, which is hopefully what people are more interested in right now,
Yeah.
I started quite a long time ago, actually, because I recorded my first demos back in 1983. So I would call the apex of that resurgence of melody and harmony within indie pop, when you had people like Aztec Camera and Prefab Sprout ruling the roost, and with whom I feel, distinct affinity.
Right.
And for some reason, those demos fell in the possession of a Belgian label, which was quite famous at the time, Disque du Crépuscule,
Mhm.
which already had a couple of French artists, but also people like Tuxedo Moon and uh, Paul Haig, of Joseph K was there as well. Billy Mackenzie of the Associates, and I ended up on the same label. Um, Released one album, one single, which went absolutely nowhere. Two singles, but which, strangely enough, found a little audience in Japan.
Mm.
And when I moved to London, which was 3 years later, um, I joined a label called L Records.
Mhm.
In fact, I was one of the first artists to sign for Michael Way's label, which also had found some success in Japan, which enabled us to carry on. And I think many people perhaps know me best in England, not elsewhere, but in England for what I did with L Records,
Mm.
with Mike. Not only just albums of my own, but I also wrote for Anthony Adverse, another album and a couple of singles. And I was used more or less as a kind of in-house producer and arranger for the label. It was very short-lived. I mean, we existed for 2 or 3 years. That was that.
Yes,
But
sure.
it really had, I think, quite an impact in terms
Mm.
of the visual impact, but also the approach to music, um, and which has helped me and hindered me in equal measures. It has helped me because people tend to know what L Records was. They'll know my name because of that. We had a few indie hits and so forth. But on the other hand, as well, people tend to equate whatever we were doing on L Records, very different personalities, people like Momus, people like the King of Luxembourg, people
Yeah.
like Carl Blake,
Mhm.
or Jessica Griffin and the Would Be Goods. All of us had very defined musical personalities and identities, and people tend to put us all in this kind of fantasy world, Technicolor world,
Yeah.
where we're all obsessed with Powell and Pressburger films, which is true.
Okay.
And we're obsessed with cricket, which is true.
Good.
But musically speaking, we were very, very different. The only thing we had in common, I think, was a love for pop music and pop with a capital P, and genres and artists who were not fashionable at all at the time and have come back into fashion.
Yeah.
But I mean, we were linked to the so-called lounge movement as well, which is strange when you hear some of my songs that I put in that, but there you go, why not?
Yeah, why not?
And we idolized Burt Bacharach before it became fashionable again. So we had a very clear cultural musical substract to our approach, but we were all very different. But anyway, I'm driveling.
All right.
But after Elle finished, relative success we had in Japan enabled me to carry on making music when some of my teammates couldn't do so. And so I developed a relationship with a label called Polystar and an artist called Philippe's Guitar. And people might know actually of one of them, Cornelius Keigo Yamada, who became huge on the dance scene afterwards. And they were huge fans. And they helped us, and they helped me build a kind of second career, which little by little blossomed into a completely different career. And my records started to be published in Spain, in France, in Italy, blah, blah, blah. And basically, I haven't looked back since, apart from a hiatus between 2007 and 2000. I mean, like almost a 10-year hiatus, during which I was still doing music, but I was working with and for other people rather than for myself.
Yeah.
I was working with Stuart Moxham of Young Marble Giants. I was working with Louise LeMay. I wrote arrangements for the Clientele. I wrote arrangements for other bands. I collaborated with Test Build. And it's only later that since I teamed up with my friend from the Night Mail, that things have suddenly picked up again. And I've got a new, as you know, I'm now contracted to Tapete Records in Hamburg, a very fine label indeed. Wow. And we're now about to publish our second album together, The Road to the Sea. So I actually, I leave loads of things aside because I've also worked on loads of other projects through my musical life. I've worked with Michael Way again on Siesta Records, doing so-called children fantasy records. Okay. Yes, I did. Okay, well, yeah, there's a couple of compilations which I did with Richard Preston, who was the house producer of our records back in the 1990s, and we did 3 albums together. Okay. In which we had, I didn't sing, I was just singing backing vocals, things like that, but I was writing and arranging and doing, this kind of stuff. So there is an awful lot to pick, and I have got to be stopped at one point because one thing leads to the other, and by the time I've reached the other, there's another author to talk about, and we'll never finish.
Incredible.
I don't know.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, thanks for that, Louis. So hopefully people will be able to fill the jigsaw parts together.
Yeah.
But I mean, you've had quite a few. You had your own label at one time, didn't you?
Mm-hmm, yes, I did, because there was a point at which I thought, what's the point of working with established labels, which are not really doing what they should be doing for me? Why not I give it a try? And in fact, I think I was probably one of the first. I was probably one of the first to crowdfund a record. That was back in 2003.
Yes, that's early, wasn't it? Quite about
2007? It's 2003. I think it was 2003 when I launched it, and which is at the time, was a very unusual thing to do.
Yeah, sure.
And I thought, well, is it possible for me and for us? I was working with my friend Ken Brake at the time, and I thought, well, why don't I take care of this side of things and see if we can get the money together to actually make the record. And we did it, and people crowdfunded the record, and I found little distribution deals in the US with Darla. I had a little distribution deal in Germany, one in Japan,
Mhm.
and so it was not a proper record label. It was just like a little cottage industry, but which made me realize that it was possible to do it that way.
Mm.
But of course, that was before we were hit by streaming. This was in the days where the CD was king, and before streaming came in and actually, killed that. And you needed to go back to making physical records out of vinyl to have any chance of selling finished, copies. So it was, yeah, I actually did one, two, three albums that way. And but that has been put to rest. I don't have the time to take care of a proper
No,
record
well,
label. I'm delighted that Tapete has brought has come in and is helping me and the boys doing our records and helping promoting them, which they're doing actually, I have to say, with some success,
very
and
good.
also helping them go on the road a little bit, which we're going to do in 2025, which is very unusual.
Excellent.
Yeah, and
Spain, possibly?
we at the moment there's
If you know.
Paris, no Paris, there's London,
Paris, okay.
there's Hamburg,
Hamburg, yeah.
Stade, and a couple of others which are
In the air,
in the
okay.
air.
Okay.
But there will be something resembling not a tour, but at least
Okay.
a bit of a flurry of activity on the
Flurry.
lives. Yeah.
That sounds very, very nice indeed. And it's and it's overdue, I would say, to have this sort of success. I mean, when I look back at some of your old albums, some of them are on here, of course, you know,
Hmm.
there's so much color in your music. Um, and I've got this article here, which you probably remember.
Oh dear, yes, I remember
Do you
that.
remember that one? There's some classics in here, which I love. And it really it says a lot about the music industry today, I think, still, actually. Although this was written in whenever it was, 2007 or something like that. There's so much relevance that Chris Evans puts in here that's relevant for today, I think. And when you said about we were hit by the streaming thing, I'm not a great fan of streaming, I have to say, but I know we all have it, we all have to do it. But I
Mm.
love physical things. I love to be able to hold something and to see the color of it, to read, I mean, Ocean Tango, look at it. There's so much interesting stuff in there. And then all the acknowledgements and maybe lyrics, and you've got it forever. You can lose things on your flipping phone or iPad or iPod or whatever it is. And it just drives me crazy. I just want to, and my vinyl collection's back in England. So I haven't got vinyl here in Spain, but I have CDs galore. And one of my projects is to search out as many CDs of yours as I can find and get them, because I have them somewhere downloaded on somewhere, but I don't know where it all is, in the cloud somewhere. But I just want
Yeah.
to get them, Sunshine and Delta Kiss and The Wonder of It All and all as many as I can and play them. And it's been a great pleasure for me to for instance, this one, everyone should have it.
Yeah, absolutely. Every good home should have one of
Every
those.
good home should have this.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
quite
what
agree.
a joy all of the tracks are, every single one. And whether you've got the Prague Philharmonic Orchestra playing on Azure with the color, and I mean, one of the tracks sounds like one of the Moody Blues. I forget which album they did with the orchestra. It sounds like
Oh, good
Moody
Lord.
Blues, and the 60s guitar riffs you've got in there in some of the tracks and things like that. A little bit of double bass, the fantastic harmonies. I mean, I'm a great Brian Wilson fan, and the Beach Boys are my number one, really, because I've
Yes.
met Brian a couple of times and seen them in concert since 1974, I think, in Wembley, and that was and they have been part of my life completely. Saw
Hmm.
Smile twice. Did you ever manage to see Smile? Brian Wilson presents Smile.
Yes, I was at I was front row, second row,
Well, you must be.
next at the basically the comeback gig, the very first one,
Yeah.
which started with The Little Girl I Once Knew, which actually floored us to have such a start with, to use this almost unknown single. Well,
I know,
everybody in the room knew that song by heart, but
of course.
let's just put it like only Beach Boys fans will know what was going on. And And then afterwards, I saw him, for the Smile tour, obviously. But the
Wow.
one I think in London was the most special because nobody really thought it would be possible.
Yeah.
And also, I had one of my friends on stage because Andy Paley, who produced my very first
Oh, I
single,
know. I was going to, yeah,
and he was, tragically left us
I know.
just a very little time ago,
I
and
know.
he
I
was
know.
a good friend, and he was obviously a very important person in Brian's later career,
Mm.
and he was one of the people with the Wondermints who helped put together this incredible band with which they presented this and the Pet Sounds concert, of course,
Exactly.
and the concert in Hampstead as well. And I think I was there for them all. I think I only stopped at a point where I thought, well, Brian is in such a bad way now. I think let's leave him alone.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, for sure.
but those first few concerts were, I think everybody was there. I think from Paul McCartney to Elvis Costello to everybody.
I know.
I mean, basically, and including loads of people from the independent scene and just like people fans for whom this music matters so much. But anyway, this we could we could probably do a whole program
Well, we could.
About Brian's music, but
I know. We're
that would
about
take
talking
us
about you.
again to a different place.
We're talking about you. And yeah, I was saying to my wife Sue today that if we met in person, I could probably sit around a table with you for hours, actually. And
Hmm.
just a quick last thing on Brian was I found you did Guess I'm Dumb. I never
Yeah.
knew you did that. There it was. Came across that somehow or other. Very, very nicely done. Yeah, super.
Yeah, I think it's because I had heard a version by Tatsia Mashta,
Mm.
and which I thought was terrific. And I thought this is really one of Brian's great early songs, and which is not well known enough. And Dean
Absolutely.
Broderick and I got together and devised an arrangement which is a little bit unusual because it uses
Mm.
instead of
Mm.
brass, it uses four bassoons, for example.
Oh, okay.
It's a bassoon section.
Okay.
And
Wow.
it was actually single of the week in the New Musical Express and the Melody Maker
Oh,
when it
was
was
it?
released. Yes, it was, yeah.
And that was how
And
long ago was that, Louis?
this
How
was in 1987. That was
87? Okay. Okay.
1987.
Okay.
And I've actually done quite a number of attempts at covering Brian Wilson songs. I did Little Pad was a B-side.
Wow.
I did Don't Talk, Put Your Head in My Shoulder as well, and probably, and also I just wasn't made with for these times with Dean Broderick, which is
Wow.
a song we've been often playing live,
Excellent.
either with Dean or now with Danny Manners, which we can do as a band or which we can do just as a duet, if you can believe
Super.
it. But yeah,
Super. Can't wait
so
to
yeah,
can't wait to see you live. That is going to be fantastic. Really can't wait for that.
let's hope so.
And Andy Paley. So Andy Paley appeared early on in your career, didn't he? Is
He
that
was my first producer
first
when
producer?
when I signed for Crepuscule. And he was working in Brussels at the time
All right. Okay.
with Plastic Bertrand, if you can believe it.
Okay.
And the boss of my record company, Michel Duval, thought and knew that we needed a producer because, to be honest, we had no idea how to make a record.
Mm.
And he had the inspired idea of teaming my friend Jean-François Champollion and myself when we were called the Border Boys,
The Border Boys. Yeah.
to team us with Andy, whom we met in a Brussels cafe, and we basically spoke and talked for about 3 hours about the Beach Boys, and the next day we started working together, and Andy actually introduced me to a lot of music that I didn't even know existed because he'd been working with Brian already.
Mm.
And for example, I remember sitting at the piano in Daylight Studios in Brussels, absolutely magnificent place,
Wow.
and where he was playing songs by Brian, which I only knew they existed because they were referred to in various articles, but they
Hmm.
had never seen the light of day.
Hmm.
And there's one in particular, which was the song that Brian wrote for Frank Sinatra, and Frank Sinatra never recorded.
Yeah.
which has got an amazing major to minor shift, which is so Brian and so Frank Sinatra at the same time. And I remember sitting there thinking, my goodness, this is fantastic. And so Andy and I, we got on very well together. And I was a bit starstruck because here was a guy, it's just not just the Beach Boys, but it was also, the Modern Lovers. He'd done Rock and Roll High School with the Ramones, blah, blah, blah. He had, and also he was a terrific musician on his own.
Sure.
And the Paley brothers did some absolute classic power pop in the early to mid 70s.
Okay.
And so we remain in touch. I mean, Andy used to stay at my place in Paris later on when he was, coming out of a nightclub a bit too late or whatever. Plus, he could crash. He could crash on the couch. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, and also Andy, I've got another connection with him is because of April March. And April worked with Andy on a number of records, and of course I knew April through Bertrand Burgala and the Tricatel label, and she covered one of my songs, Martine, and we actually and we're very good friends. So it's this incestuous indie scene.
I love it, and this undergroundy sort of movement, if you like, that exists. What incredible music comes out of that, and yet where is it? People don't even know about it. I mean, if you talk to someone about Brian Wilson, say, "Oh, was he in the Beach Boys?" But if you listen to some of the stuff today, it's very, very. There's no color in a lot of it. When I got the last Coldplay album, I never finished playing it. I don't think it's in the vaults somewhere. But your music is full of color, and the harmonies are great. You've got orchestration, you've got a bit of soul, a bit of jazz, a bit of West Coast USA. I mean, where does all that come from, Lucy? Is that something that I mean, I know you've talked about when you walk, things come to you.
Yeah, that's usually well, I do walk a lot.
Okay, good. Right.
And so yes, there's that. Most of the stuff that I write is written away from instruments, and then I work it out later. And the arrangement, of course, is a different stage. But I mostly work within my head and with pen and paper. So I'm very, very old-fashioned. I do not have any recording equipment at home.
Okay.
I don't have a home studio.
Okay.
I love being in studios, but I much prefer to go out and have the feeling this is a special moment, where some of my friends, Sean, he has a home studio. Bertrand's got a home studio. Yeah. Sure. But I never felt the need for it. I've got my piano just here and got my bass and my acoustic guitar. But most of the writing is done in my head. That's wow. I'm very, very old fashioned when it comes to that, and it's a bit unusual, I think, in pop to work like that. But that's the kind of musician I am. Wow. And I tend to when I write, which I don't do every day, happens when it happens. I tend to write from A to Z. So it's not just like a set of lyrics or a melody or a chord progression. It tends to be already arranged. It's almost like an orchestral piece. So, which is why it serves no real purpose for me to have a home studio. I know what I want. I can notate it, and then I can go. Now I work with Andy Lewis. Yes. And we work very, very well together. Like before, I used to work with Ken Brake. Yes. And we used to work very well together as well. So I do need people to put what I have in my head into the open in a shape that I'm pleased with. And as you probably have gathered listening to my records, I'm not easy to please when it comes to music. I like things to be really achieved and really as close as possible to what I hear here and what we can do and what what the boys can do too.
Mm.
And so we're all real perfectionists, I must
I
say.
love it, and you can tell every single song.